The security camera footage from the Second Chance Animal Shelter on the afternoon of November 12, 2025, captured something the staff still cannot explain without tearing up. In the grainy, black and white frame of Kennel 42, a man sits on the cold concrete floor. He isn't a small man. He is broad-shouldered, a retired veteran named Elias, whose hands have seen the weight of a rifle for over 20 years. But in this moment, those hands are covering his face as his body shakes with silent, heavy sobs. In the far corner of the cage, a one-eyed, elderly dog named Barnaby, a dog known for snapping at anyone who comes near, is watching him. The room around them is loud with the barking of 50 other dogs, but between these two, there is a vacuum of stillness. If this hadn't been caught on tape, no one would have believed that a man so strong could break so completely, or that a dog so terrified could be the one to fix him. Elias didn't come to the shelter to adopt. He came because the silence of his empty apartment had become louder than the explosions he remembered from the war. He suffered from severe PTSD, a condition that made every car backfire sound like a mortar and every crowded street feel like a battlefield. For 3 years, Elias lived as a ghost in his own city, pushing away family and friends because they couldn't understand the noise inside his head. Then there was Barnaby. Barnaby was a 10-year-old stray found shivering under a bridge during a thunderstorm. He had lost his left eye to a cruel encounter on the streets and carried a deep, trembling fear of loud noises. At the shelter, Barnaby was labeled unadoptable. Every time a potential family walked by, the clatter of their shoes or the high-pitched excitement of children would send Barnaby into a frantic, defensive growl. He was a dog living in a constant state of red alert, his nervous system shattered by a world that was simply too loud. The shelter staff noticed that Elias always stopped at Barnaby's kennel. He didn't try to pet him, he just stood there. He recognized the look in Barnaby's one good eye, the hypervigilance, the exhaustion of always waiting for the next blow to fall. Two souls, separated by species but united by the same invisible scars. Elias knew what it was like to be judged for your reactions to a world that had hurt you. He knew what it was like to want to disappear into the shadows because the light felt too exposing. On that Tuesday, Elias asked the volunteer if he could just sit inside the kennel for a moment. He didn't want to play. He just wanted to be somewhere where he didn't have to pretend to be okay. Elias sat with his back against the chain-link fence, his head buried in his knees. The weight of his memories, the friends lost, the sounds of the desert, the isolation of the present, finally crushed him. He began to weep, not for the dog, but for himself. He felt small, broken, and entirely alone in that cage. That's when it happened. Barnaby, who usually retreated to the furthest corner when someone entered, didn't growl. He didn't hide. He stood up slowly, his old joints creaking. He watched the man's shaking shoulders with a strange, ancient wisdom. With cautious, deliberate steps, Barnaby crossed the concrete floor. He bypassed the food bowl he usually guarded so fiercely. He ignored the sudden clank of a metal door down the hallway. The dog reached out his wet nose and nudged Elias's forearm. Specifically, the arm where a long, jagged scar from an IED blast ran from wrist to elbow. Elias froze. He stopped breathing for a second, expecting a bite. Instead, he felt something warm and heavy. Barnaby lowered his head and rested it directly on that scar. He leaned his entire body weight against Elias's side, closing his one good eye and letting out a long, shuddering sigh. In that moment, the barking of the other dogs seemed to fade into the background. The noise in Elias's head stopped. It was as if Barnaby was saying, "I know where it hurts. I am tired too. Let's just be tired together." Elias slowly uncovered his face and looked down at the dog. He saw the missing eye, the gray muzzle, and the way the dog's paws were tucked under him in a gesture of total trust. Elias didn't reach for a treat or a toy. He simply laid his hand over Barnaby's neck, feeling the rhythmic beat of a heart that was just as scarred as his own. For the first time in years, Elias wasn't a soldier, and Barnaby wasn't a stray. They were just two heartbeats in a quiet cage, finding the only kind of peace that made sense to them, the peace of being understood without a single word being spoken. The shelter volunteer who checked the camera feed that evening shared the clip on the shelter's social media page with a simple caption, "Healing finds a way." Within 48 hours, the video had been viewed over 3 million times. People from across the country commented, many of them veterans themselves, moved by the sight of such raw, mutual rescue. But Elias didn't care about the views. He had already signed the papers. He walked out of the shelter that day with Barnaby by his side. They didn't go to a busy park or a loud celebration. They went to a quiet trail in the woods. Today, Elias's neighbors see them every morning. They move at the same pace, a slow, steady walk. When a car backfires or a storm rolls in, Elias doesn't reach for his medication, and Barnaby doesn't hide under the bed. They find each other. Elias puts his hand on Barnaby's head, and Barnaby leans into Elias's leg. They have created a world where the noise can't reach them anymore. A simple fundraising campaign started in their name has since provided service dog training for 12 other veterans in the city. We often walk into animal shelters with a quiet, perhaps unconscious, sense of superiority. We walk through those echoes of barking and the smell of concrete, convinced that we are the ones holding the keys to freedom. We cast ourselves as the protagonists of a grand rescue, the heroes descending into the sunless depths to pull a lost, broken soul back into the light of the living. We think we are the ones doing the giving. But Elias and Barnaby taught us something far more profound on that rainy Tuesday afternoon. They showed us that the bars of a kennel aren't the only things that keep a soul imprisoned. Sometimes the strongest cages are the ones we build around our own hearts out of grief, duty, or the scars of a life lived on the front lines. True heroism, we've come to realize, isn't just about the strength to save another life. It is about the immense, terrifying courage to be vulnerable enough to be saved yourself. It is about dropping the armor we've worn for decades and realizing that the only way to truly heal our own jagged wounds is to reach out and comfort the wounds of another. In that cold kennel, as man and dog looked into each other's eyes, the labels of rescuer and unadoptable simply evaporated. Because in the end, we aren't just rescuing animals from a lonely fate. We are reclaiming the fragments of our own humanity that we thought were lost to the shadows long ago. We are stitching back together the parts of ourselves that forgot how to hope. Sometimes, the greatest hero in the story isn't the one who opens the cage, but the one who has the grace to admit they were lost until they were found by a friend with 4 paws and a scruffy coat. Thank you for watching, for listening, and for believing in the transformative power of a second chance. Not just for them, but for all of us.